Just because we're capable of growing hair doesn't automatically mean that we know what to do with it. There are a lot of styling tools involved in pretty much any hairstyle, whether your hair is straight, curly, somewhere in between, short, long. There's a tool for every possible style, and it can be really overwhelming, especially when you're just starting out. This is a very beginner-friendly guide as far as hairstyling tools for beginners. I'm going to cover a little bit of everything from combs to curlers and even hot tools, and sort of offer some pointers as far as how to use them, and also, where applicable, the products that I recommend adding to your arsenal as far as things that you're going to want to have on hand when you're getting started styling your hair or somebody else's. One of the most basic tools of the trade is going to be a comb, which, they're common. Pretty much everybody knows how to use them to one degree or another. But the very best comb that you're going to want to have in your arsenal is a basic wide tooth comb, and you can get these at any drugstore, beauty supply store. You can find them in grocery stores. They're kind of all over the place, and they all look pretty similar. But the wide teeth, there's like quite a gap between each of the teeth, and what that does is when you're detangling your hair, it helps to prevent breakage. So when you're combing your hair, don't just start at the top and yank it through, because you're gonna push those knots down until they end up in a big old knot ball somewhere along the hair shaft. You're gonna wanna start at the bottom, detangle the bottom, and then work your way up a little bit more each time until you work your way all the way up to the top and it is detangled. That helps to reduce breakage and, just keeps your hair in better condition, in preparation for styling. One of my children made off with my rat tail comb. That said, I can still demonstrate what that is. So a rat tail comb, you may have heard the term. It's kind of like a basic comb that has a tip on the end of it that's sort of like thin and pointy. Kind of looks like that. The rat tail makes it easy to section your hair, whether you're braiding, whether you're putting it into sections for curling or straightening, whatever you're doing. This basically, you can take it anywhere along your scalp and separate your hair into perfectly straight lines, whether you're, dividing it this way to pin some up, dividing it into a whole lot of sections to do whatever you're going to do with it. The rat tail comb is really good for that. And really, in a pinch, you can use a chopstick, or any kind of pointy thing that isn't sharp. So, it's just plastic and it's pointy, but it's rounded. So anything like that will do the job of a rat tail comb. Clearly, this is technically a brush that I use for applying hair dye, but in a pinch, when people steal my combs, this works. Another basic tool that you're going to want to have on hand is clips like this. These are kind of long. You can get them at any beauty supply store, and some drugstores will carry them too. But when you're sectioning your hair and need to pin pieces of it out of the way, or get, sections out of the way, this is really good for that, because you can just sort of, twist your hair, stick it up here, open the clip it up, and it stays out of the way. So when you're doing hairstyles, especially that involve, curling or straightening, and you need to, section hair and get some of it out of your way, these clips are really inexpensive. No particular name brand. Like I said, you can get them at any beauty supply store, but these are super handy to have. One of the tools that I think is really important to have just for general styling is a good spray bottle. There are going to be times where you might need to dampen your hair a little bit, whether it's because you're applying a certain product that needs your hair to be damp, or, you're styling it in some way that it's just easier or more effective if the strands are slightly wet. And you might be tempted to just get like a random old spray bottle from the dollar store, which you can do, but the spray usually is larger droplets, so it might not coat the hair shaft evenly. You might end up with areas that are wetter or less wet than others. So my favorite is the just the water bottle from LUS. This is technically a brand for curly hair, and when my hair is permed, it is actually very curly, but this water bottle has a very fine mist and a very long spray. So one spray, you get a few seconds of just very fine water mist, so you can lightly dampen your hair as you need to, and it's not going to oversaturate too quickly. So I'll just kind of show you how this sprays so you can see it, and I'm going to try not to spray my mic because that could be really problematic. But all right, here we go. So as you can see, like, the mist is really, really fine. When it sprays, it's a very fine mist. So it just slightly dampens my hair, but definitely a water bottle is a good thing to have when you're getting started hairstyling, because it'll come in handy for a lot of different uses. If you ever have to dry your hair, a hair dryer is a pretty important tool to have. I am really partial to this one from Revlon. It's ionic, but the reason that I got it is because I wear my hair permed sometimes, and when it's curly, I need a diffuser, and it has the very best diffuser that I've ever seen or used in my life. It's super large, gives great coverage, and if you're drying curls, you can't do better than this. But it snaps right on, and you can put your curls in and hold them in place to dry without them blowing around. It also comes with a concentrator attachment, so if you want to basically concentrate the airflow to any particular area without affecting the rest of your hair, you'll pop that on, and it basically shrinks down the airflow to a very small area, so you can get very precise control over where your air is going. Now that that's out of the way, we're going to start with curling tools. And there are several different ways to curl your hair, and one method really isn't necessarily better than the other. It really comes down to whether or not you want to use heat on your hair and what your hair's texture and condition is. So if you're somebody who would prefer to curl your hair without heat, I have a couple of favorite tools, and these really aren't like a particular brand. You can find them kind of anywhere. The first is a Velcro roller, which a lot of times I use for my fringe, like my longer bangs. I'll just use a Velcro roller, and I'll put my hair in the roller when it's slightly damp, and then just let it air dry. In my experience, that's a really good heat-free way to curl your hair, really, really easily with minimal damage. This is good if your hair doesn't hold curls well when they come from hot tools, because again, everybody's hair texture is different, and heat styling tools can be effective for some, but not necessarily for others. So if your hair is really, really fine and thin, in my experience, styling wet and then letting it dry has a longer hold. When I was a kid, my hair was really, really fine. It was poker straight, and I could not, if I used a curling iron, the curl would fall out within half an hour. So to use a Velcro roller, all you'll want to do is, take the section of hair that you're going to want to curl, and if you're doing the air dry method, you'll lightly mist, and just make sure it's detangled. I just do one pass. And then however you want to curl your hair, whether you're curling it under, upwards, or backwards, whatever you're doing, you're just gonna wrap your hair around and then roll it and use one of these longer clips to clip it into place. And it'll just hold itself, with the clip, and you can go about the rest of your day while your hair is air drying. And when you're ready to take the curls out, you just release the clip and the curler comes out. Another heat-free method to curl your hair is flexi rods, which are pretty much what they say they are. They're flexible rods, and there's a wire inside and padding that your hair wraps around. So these are a good option if you want to style your hair the night before and then wake up with your hair curly without using any heat. And these are super soft, so you can sleep in these. You can lay on your pillow. They're not really going to be uncomfortable. They might feel a little weird. I'm not a fan, but there are plenty of people that aren't bothered by the sensation of things in their hair while they're sleeping. So, if that's you, these would work really well. But to use these to do any curl, you're just gonna take your rod and you're gonna wrap your hair around. And then, once it's in place, you're gonna bend these to hold the curler in place. And then you've got, a curl, and this is really well padded. It's soft, so you could sleep on these and not be too uncomfortable. And then in the morning, you'll just unfold them, unroll, and take out your curls. So they're really simple to use, and that's another good option if you want to avoid heat at all costs. So if you would rather curl your hair with heat, one of the most obvious tools probably is the curling iron, which I have in my hand right now. This one is from Bella, and it's just a regular basic clamp style, which means it has a clamp that holds your hair in place, once you roll it around the barrel. Why I like this one, especially for beginners, it doesn't have a button here. So, when you're learning how to use a curling wand, a lot of curling irons have a button that is really inconveniently placed, if you ask me, right here. It's easy to bump. It's easy to accidentally shut it off or change the temperature. The one from Bella doesn't have that. The temperature control is on the bottom, and you just twist it to turn it on. And what's great about this one too is it has very precise temperature control. Some basic curling irons, they only have maybe low or high, or some just have a standard temperature that it's just on or off. Everybody's hair texture is different. So, you want to be able to have something that you can adjust the temperature, especially when you're first learning how to curl your hair. It's generally a good idea to start lower and, maybe practice with low heat, get familiar with how it feels. And you can do that with a curling iron like this because you can actually set the temperature. To use a curling iron, really simple. We'll just take a section of hair, and I'll just do a real quick demonstration so you can see, but I find it best to take this, run it down one pass quickly, and then roll it. Now, I always leave my ends out because my ends are pretty heavily bleached. So when I'm using a hot tool, I generally leave my ends kind of sticking out just to kind of, prevent heat damage. And depending on your temperature setting and your hair's texture, you might hold the iron in place anywhere from, my best advice is to start at a lower temperature and just sort of feel it out. See how your hair holds a curl at 250 degrees or 300 degrees, and then increase it if you need to. Some curling irons will go up to 400 or 450, which, if your hair is really, really thick and coarse, might be okay. If your hair is very thin and fine, that's gonna very likely scorch it and potentially burn your hair. So you just wanna be careful using hot tools like this, especially when you're just starting out. Start at a lower temperature, feel it out, and then increase if you need to. When you wanna wear your hair in a straight and sleek style, generally the best tool for that is going to be a proper hair straightener. Most of them look a lot like this or pretty similar. This one is from Alabella. It's the infrared hair straightener, and it has plates on the inside, and when you put your hair through this and this clamps, you run the tool down the hair shaft and it's going to straighten and smooth. When you're using a tool like this, and I have this unplugged because I didn't want to risk burning my hair while I'm talking about this and giving a demonstration. So to straighten your hair, you're going to take a section and you want to make sure that it's like big enough. You don't want to take a section that's too small because you'll run the risk of scorching your hair a little more easily. But you will start up near the root, clamp it down, and then move this down. And you want to make sure that you keep your straightener moving. Don't leave it sit in one particular place for too long, because that can damage your hair and, you know, can honestly burn it right off if you're not careful. So when you're using a tool like this, you're going to keep it moving down the hair shaft. A hair straightener is effective, but depending on your hair's texture, thickness, coarseness, you might not see perfectly straight results in one pass. I find it best to do a section. If it doesn't seem straight enough, I move on to the next and let that first section cool down a little bit, do another section or two, and then come back to this. There is one other hot tool for straightening hair that doesn't involve like an iron, and the tool itself I consider to be a little more of an advanced tool because it's an air styler and it has multiple attachments. That said, the detangler brush, this is part of the 6-in-1 air styler from Alabella. This detangler brush detangles but straightens as it dries your hair. So once you have your hair mostly dry with the hair dryer, you use this, you know, with low heat or high heat, and you basically just run it down the hair shaft so it's blowing hot air that is drying and straightening and detangling all at once. This is super easy to use. If you can brush your hair, you can use this, but it's a really effective straightener, especially if you don't want to use an iron. Now that we've covered the basic tools of the trade, hopefully you feel a little more confident about what the tools are, how they work, and what they do. So, you know, as you get started experimenting, you kind of at least have a little bit more of an idea of what to expect. Before you get started, I just want to cover just a few precautions, mistakes to avoid, things you just want to be careful of before you get going. First off, of course, if you're working with hot tools, they get hot. So you want to be very careful as far as getting the tools too close to your scalp, too close to your fingers. You just always handle them by the handle or the ends. Alabella's styling tools actually come with a heat resistant glove, so you can use that for the hand that's going to be anywhere around, you know, the hot part of the tool. On that note, also be careful of how long you leave hot tools on your hair. You know, your hair, it might be in great condition, might be super healthy, might be able to withstand a lot, but you still want to be careful because damage can happen quickly. So, you know, especially if you're heat styling every day, that sort of adds up. You can also use a heat protectant spray. There are a lot of different brands out there. You can see, you know, what works best for you as far as, you know, texture, consistency, brand, all of that. Maybe get recommendations from friends, you know, see what they use and like. But a heat protectant spray it's a really good idea, especially if you're going to be heat styling every day. When you're using hot tools, you'll want to be careful what else you put on your hair beforehand. A heat protectant spray is a great idea because it protects your hair from heat, but you might, after you're done styling your hair, you might want sheen, so you're adding oil or other things. Those are products that you want to add after the heat styling. Don't apply, shine oils or other oils to your hair before using a hot tool, because if you cook at all, you understand oil and heat can fry things, and you don't want to fry your hair. So if you're going to be using like a finishing oil, or you want to add like sheen to your hair, that kind of stuff, add to your hair after it's heat styled, not before. When you're heat styling, especially when you're curling, you might find it easier to pin some of your hair up out of the way, so you can, start at the lower sections and, work your way up. A lot of people will divide their hair sort of halfway, so it's half up, half down. They'll curl or straighten what's down first, let the top half down, and then style that. You can kind of see what works best for you based on how thick your hair is, and how long it takes you to style. If you're curling an entire head of hair with a curling iron, that can take a little while, and pinning it up can kind of keep things out of the way while you're working, and it just makes the process go a little more smoothly. On that note, when you're heat styling, be patient, especially if you have long hair or thick hair. It might take a while. Curling an entire head of hair with a curling iron, you watch YouTube videos and they kind of fly through it with, things on, like fast forward while they're, showing demonstrations. In real life, that takes a lot longer. There's a reason why they use the fast forward setting in those finished videos, right? So be realistic with your time. If you're styling your hair, especially while you're still learning, give yourself more time, just so, you can practice with the tools. You're not in such a rush, especially when you're curling an entire head of hair with like a curling iron. It's gonna take a hot minute, literally. When you're using heat-free curling tools like this, generally you're gonna want to apply your curling product to your damp hair before you roll them up in style. That just helps the curl to set. And then after you take your curlers out, you can finish with whatever, hairspray, finishing sprays, glosses, things like that you're gonna use. Hopefully this video and these tips have kind of set you on a path to greater confidence when it comes to picking up hairstyling tools and actually wielding them effectively. It is a process, so be patient with yourself. We didn't all come out of the womb knowing how to curl our hair or style it, 18 different ways. If you've got tips and advice or even styling tools that you recommend, share them in the comments.